Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of MMA Cheat Sheet Live. This is Brandon Arcade, and joining me over the airwaves are Ridgers 10 and Chris, back in the house. Finally, got the man back. Blood Rain 39, bringing us some picks this week. A couple of things I just wanted to touch on right off the bat. We have a ton of new members once again, so welcome, everybody. Let's get that chatter going. Let's get the conversation rolling. We got lots of stuff to talk about in the gut room. NBA's in full swing. Ridge is bringing the big picks there on the NBA. I think Scott's been bringing some pretty solid picks too lately, and Bobby's always up for a couple of good lines. And don't sleep on Randy. Randy's got some solid picks these days. He puts together our words probably better than anybody. So if Randy's posting a basketball line, take notice. Um, let's see here. A couple other things I wanted to touch on. A few words about the group and what's our purpose. Basically, we're a bunch of guys that aren't getting paid to do this. We do it out of the love of the game. And make no mistake, Prime is the only guy getting paid. And so if you're in the gut room, it's an equal playing field in terms of conversation and respect and all that good stuff. Where no one there is outshining anybody. We're all just a group of guys that are trying to have a good time. The purpose of this podcast specifically is to focus on MMA. So if you're one of our trusted followers, one of our friends, somebody who hangs around and actually listens to the whole thing, we throw a 3-pack together, and the purpose of this podcast is to basically fill in the blanks. We've had some pretty good success over the year. We do have a winning record since we started doing the podcast, though we had a pretty rough patch there for a while. It was pretty bad. I think the month of August was probably the worst month in MMA I've ever had. But there's a lot of transition going on in the UFC, and until they let us bet on Bellator and the World Series of Fighting and Risen and all that stuff, this is all we got. So we can't really curb those UFC losses with all those unknown fighters and new faces like I want to. Basically, I'm really hoping that the merger gives us a chance to bet on Bellator and all those other things I mentioned, especially if we can get it up there in time before Chael versus Tito. How freaking awesome would it be to bet that in DFS? A couple other things. Like I said, welcome back, Chris. It's good to have you back. It's been a while. I hope that things are going better for you. Hey, Ridge, I didn't you want to say something in regards to the presidential election or politics in general? The floor is yours.
Sure. So I'm not gonna go into a big spiel about either side. Really, I've just been seeing a lot of hate on Facebook. I'm not gonna go saying who I voted for because I really think it's none of anyone's business about who anyone votes for. Really, you vote on your beliefs, but all this stuff from both the losing and the winning side about you should have never voted for this person or that person. Feel free to unfriend me if you voted for so and so. Guys, it needs to stop. Really, let's get the hate out of here. That's just tearing our country apart. And it doesn't matter who the president-elect may be. Seriously, if we're going to hate each other about who it is, this country's going to fall apart just like that. So that's really all I got to say on that, but think about it for a little bit, guys.
Yeah, strong words. I 100% agree. It's funny, actually. I've had this conversation in the group a few times. If I was allowed, I was going to cast my vote for Brian Stan. I think he's the greatest living American, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out this morning from Jamie that Brian Stan went on record that he is considering entering politics. So I've got a Stan Kennedy ticket already punched for 2020.
Very nice.
Since we're on the off topics, Chris, is there anything you want to voice your opinion about, or how you feeling?
I mean, yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about that. I see too much where a lot of people who even go to church talk about how they won't, they are picking sides and talking about they don't even want to be friends and all this. And coming from a church where God commands you to love, and that's your only commandment right now in the New Testament is you are to love. That's it. He commands you to love. And all this hate, especially coming from people who are going to church, is really upsetting. And I don't want to see it anymore. I'm with you, Ryan. I want to see less hatred. And, body is as bad as the black and white back in the old days. It's disgusting to me, and I don't want to see it anymore.
It is all about the love. We need more of the love. Oh, I dropped you guys. Sorry about that noise. I dropped the phone. Yeah, speaking of love, I love MMA. I don't know about you guys, but it's the greatest thing in the world to me. Starting off our card. I can't believe it. Like, let's not even start off a card about, or excuse me, start off on the fights. UFC 205 has got to be like the single greatest card ever put together. And I know they use that gimmick a lot. Like UFC 200 was supposed to be the greatest card ever, UFC 96 and UFC 100 back in the day. But if you look at this card from top to bottom, this is the greatest collection of talent and contenders. You know, like real fights have finally been made. Like with the exception of the gimmicks that were surrounding the main event and all the lobbying from both sides for this fight, this really has to be the best card put together on paper. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys agree with me?
Yes, this is very much a high. The reason I kind of backed off is because there's too many fights happening where these guys I didn't know who they were. It's almost like predicting what a minor league baseball player was going to do in his first week at the major league level. It's impossible to predict. Here we have a card full of fighters, and almost pretty much every single one of them I've already heard of many times over. I've watched them fight, know who they are, and you just know what you're getting out of these people. You know who shows up for the big fights. You know who doesn't. I feel very confident in this card. I really do.
Are you as confident, Ridge?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I'm so excited for this card. Like everything that they put together. There's no matchup in here that's really like, I guess, one of those where you ask yourself, where do they think of this matchup? I mean, all these matchups are really well thought out. Everyone's going to really have a pretty good test. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The card by itself is the best ever. I agree with that. Maybe 200 had the best week of fights because they had the 3 cards and all of them had spectacular main events, spectacular fights. But this card just as a singular card is, the best collection of fights they've ever put together.
You know what's funny about that 3 weeks you mentioned around, or the 3 fights you mentioned around UFC 200, all the headliners from those 3 fight cards during that International Fight Week are on this card. That's how good this card is.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right, guys, let's start at the top. The big one, the man himself, Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez. Conor McGregor's coming in with a record of 20-3. Eddie Alvarez is coming in with a record of 28-4. Their prices, I was actually a little shocked. Eddie Alvarez is 7,600, and Conor McGregor, I believe, was 8,600. Is that right, Ridge? 86.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, my first take on this fight was, okay, well, Conor McGregor finds the sweet spot. He wins in the first round. And I've actually seen quite a few people who do this for a living who say that still to this day. Like if you go to SureDog, I mean, that's the write-up. Conor McGregor first round KO. But for me, for the value and for DFS purposes, Eddie Alvarez has a ton of value. I mean, the guy is capable of going the distance and winning. If he keeps McGregor backpedaling the whole fight, I look for this to be a really good opportunity to cash with a player that's below the average line in terms of DFS pricing. I'm really huge on his output, especially if he can tire out McGregor. The big what if though is that first round. What's Conor going to do after the first round if it even goes that far? I mean, he could have already won. He could be in the back having a beer, or he could be stressing on the ground with Eddie Alvarez smothering him with elbows and punches and a hand over his mouth the whole time. I mean, I think that Eddie Alvarez's heart and determination and the psychology of this fight favors Alvarez because McGregor is constantly in transition. He's constantly getting richer. He's constantly surrounding himself with more people. He brought in Dylan Dennis, which I think is a really great move, but I don't see how McGregor improving his jiu-jitsu is going to help him beat Eddie Alvarez. It would probably have been better if he brought in like Islandi Lara or somebody like that to improve his boxing. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to delve too much into this by myself. Ridge, we'll start with you. What's your take on this fight?
Yeah, there's all this hype around McGregor, and it's warranted. I mean, let's be honest. This guy came in. He's a phenom. He's knocked all these guys out. Then he goes up, and yeah, he's fighting at welterweight. But let's be honest, he's fighting a lightweight. You know, he's fighting someone that is basically his size. McGregor is a huge featherweight, and then he goes up and he fights basically a true lightweight. And McGregor is he's basically an average size lightweight. So you notice when he's fighting Diaz, his power is negated almost. You know, he can't knock Diaz out. He's hitting him with these huge bombs. And I think you're going to see more of that with Alverez. Alverez, okay, yeah, he gets rocked a little bit, but he seemingly almost always comes back from it. He's going to take, some damage for sure, and he's going to have to survive some of these big shots. And personally, I think he will. People think Alvarez is just all heart, and he just survives and just wins on that. But it's not true. This guy is a legitimate boxer. He's a legitimate wrestler. I mean, he's honestly a great fighter. You go back and you look at his last few fights. He beats Michael Chandler, comes into the UFC, and he loses to Cerrone. Okay, Cerrone is on a freaking tear right now, and he's doing it at welterweight. He comes in, he beats Melendez, he beats Pettis, he beats Dos Anjos, and he knocks Dos Anjos out. And you look at this, and this guy is awesome. He's one of the best fighters that people don't even know about. So, personally, I think Alvarez pretty much just drives McGregor down. He's going to be able to take him to the mat if he wants to. I think it's a smart move to do so, because on his feet, I don't think he's as good as McGregor, even though his boxing is very solid. McGregor has the kicks that are just better. But I think Alvarez is smart about this. He starts taking it to the ground if he feels he can't strike. And personally, I think that Alvarez wins this by a close decision. If not, a late TKO. So for me, Alvarez is a great play in all formats. And honestly, so is McGregor. This is a 5-round fight. There's going to be a ton of volume. I don't see either one of these guys really getting knocked out early unless it's McGregor. So yeah, I think either one of these guys are in play in cash and GPPs. They're both going to throw a ton of volume, and both have KO upside late in the fight.
All right, Chris, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. This is a fight you could take both of these guys in. 5-round fight, lots of volume. We both remember McGregor and Diaz. In fact, I took down the GPP on 200 because I stacked McGregor and Diaz. I had both of them as the late night GPP, but I was one of the 40-some winners that took that down. 7,800 people, 7,800 entries, and took that down because we stacked McGregor and Diaz. Not a lot of people thought about doing that. I think it's going to start getting a little bit more common, more now that more people are getting more familiar with DFS. This is a fight you can stack. But we're going to, a little bit more I want to get into, though, is, it's McGregor. He's fighting his third fight outside of his division. And this is kind of becoming a freak show, and it's starting to actually get into the heads of other fighters that we're going to get into later on, when we talk about Michael Johnson and whatnot, because there's fighters that want to fight McGregor, there's fighters that want to fight Eddie Alverez, and these two are now fighting each other. And it's going to change. I think this is going to be actually something for DFS purposes, like Brandon and I talked about earlier off the air. But again, Brian touched on it. Eddie Alvarez, he's a better wrestler. He's going to take this to the ground. He should anyways. That'd be the smart thing to do, because I don't know, unless you're like Nate Diaz, who likes getting hit and thrives off getting hit, I don't think you want to just sit there and take leg kicks and shot after shot, because McGregor can just sit there and, he can just sit there and back up and hit you and back up and hit you, and it's hard to get at him. And if he is, if he can do that for 5 rounds, obviously he's going to win the fight. If he does work very hard, he continues to improve his game in every aspect, and if the trainers that he brought in, that Brandon talked about, has actually been working, and he stuffs Eddie Alvarez with takedowns over and over and keeps us at a distance, this is McGregor's fight. He's going to win. But Eddie Alvarez gets this fight to the ground, enough time throughout the fight. He gets the ground and pound in, and maybe even working a submission. This could be Eddie Alvarez's fight. This is definitely but I don't think this is going to be a finish. I really don't see either fighter finishing this fight. I think this goes the distance, making this very much a cash game option for both fighters.
Yeah, let's make no mistake about what my pick was. I definitely feel like both these guys have the 100 plus point potential. But for me specifically, I'm an Eddie Alvarez fan in this fight for DFS purposes. I'm not a Conor McGregor fanboy in real life, but I mean, who doesn't like watching the guy perform? I mean, love him or hate him, you're watching him because he really is talented. And Ridge brought up a really good point about his power being stifled by Diaz. He still cut him up real good, though. He can land shots. He can hurt lightweights. I like his chances as a lightweight. I liked his chances as a lightweight when he was in Cage Warriors, actually. I thought he was going to come to the UFC as a 55er. I'm surprised he decided to cut all that weight and drop down and win that title. I think he just did it to prove his point and then get himself into position for where he is now. I would argue that unless Conor McGregor loses this fight convincingly, he stays at lightweight. I don't see any purpose of him ever going back to 145. I mean, the man makes too much money fighting at any weight class to drop down and virtually kill himself just to fight for a title that really at the end of the day isn't going to mean much to him. So yeah, I actually like Connor as a super GPP play. I like him in cash for the 5 round potential. I like Alvarez, not more, basically as a cash play only because if he wins a decision, then yeah, maybe he can hit the 100 point mark. But I don't see him as that GPP friendly other than his price, which I guess in turn makes him GPP friendly. But it just depends on where you prioritize the value. Anything you guys want to add to that main event before we move on to the co-main?
Sure. Just really quick, I want to specify that when I did win that GPP, that was the main card only. When I'm talking about stacking, that was for the main card only. You can still stack if you want to do it for the full card, but I'm not a fan of stacking on a full card when there's 12 fights to pick from.
Yeah.
But that's all I wanted to specify.
I remember that night, actually. When you do those main slate cards, you kind of have to stack a fight. And it's always good to stack the 5 rounder if it's clearly not going to be a finish. I mean, like if you want to go on the flip side, 2 fights down, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. That's going to be a fight where there's the potential for a double stack on a main card only. But before we touch on that, I guess the co-main, I don't even know if you want to call that. This is just good enough for me as a main event on any card, even pay-per-view. We got Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. The champ is 16-3. The challenger is 13-1. Woodley's coming in at 7,400, surprisingly, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson as the challenger actually is coming in at 8,800. So according to Vegas and according to DK, Wonderboy should be the one defending the title in this fight. For me personally, I love Tyron Woodley. I think he's one of the best offensive-minded wrestlers that is in the entire UFC. He's got that Chuck Liddell gene where he uses his wrestling to stop other wrestlers, but he'll rely on the takedown if necessary for ground and pound. Really, Tyron Woodley, though, has thunder brick fists, and the man throws lightning and thunder in every shot. With the problem with that, though, is he gasses incredibly fast, faster than he should for being a champ. Though he finished Robbie Lawler in the first round with that huge lunging shot and follow-up punches, and that's Tyron Woodley's bread and butter. When he gets on those follow-up punches, like you've already lost the fight. Like he will, even if he's not hitting you, he throws them with such conviction that the ref just stops the fight. I'm actually curious who the ref in this fight is, because if it's Herb Dean, then we might be looking at Tyron Woodley having a little more value here just because Herb Dean's in there with him. With that said, though, I'm pretty huge on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, even at his price. I think he wears down Woodley and eventually evades enough punches to where he can get a finish in about the 4th or the 5th round. I don't see this being a decision because Woodley's gas tank just doesn't permit him to go 25 minutes. So he's either won by then or lost by then. I do like Woodley's price. 7,400 is a really nice price tag on a guy who's champion with those credentials and that power. It's really not a bad GPP play if you're doing a fringe GPP with a couple of contrarian picks. I guarantee Woodley's ownership is going to be really low. Chris, let's start with you actually on this one. What's your take on Woodley versus Thompson?
I'm gonna have to lean with Wonder Boy as well, and it's mostly just the cardio issues with Woodley, like you talked about. Dude is a freak athlete, absolute freak athlete. And so much fun to watch these guys come into the UFC, but they gas themselves out because, like you said, he throws thunder and lightning and everything. It's not as much setting up. Like Stephen Thompson, he's going to set you up. He's got great footwork, not sitting there in a straight line. He's moving all the time. He hits hard, great striker. And I just think that he can use those skills, utilize them, and beat Tyrone Woodley. And you're right, it's probably going to happen probably the fourth, give or take the fourth. But a Woodley for GPP, sure. We make a lot of GPP laps when we do this, so there's no reason why you couldn't try to throw in a Tyrone Woodley in there because, geez, the guy he can hit hard, he can knock you out, and hey, that's anytime you say that about somebody, that's a GPP flyer in my eyes. So, and at that price, geez, why not? But I think the safer pick has to be Stephen Thompson. That will be my pick. My official pick will be Stephen Thompson right around the fourth round.
All right, Ridge, what you got?
Yeah, so this is you guys have hit pretty much the nail on the head here. The one thing as a wrestler that I love about Woodley is he hasn't completely abandoned his wrestling game like you've seen some guys do. You see some wrestlers come in and they're originally all they do is wrestle, ground and pound, but then they learn how to punch, throw a big hendo bomb for instance, and they don't wrestle anymore. Someone like Dan Henderson, or you mentioned Liddell. Late in Liddell's career, literally all he did was stuff takedowns and try to throw a huge overhand, and he completely got away from taking people down. Woodley hasn't done that yet. The guy, he can box, has the huge punches, but he still actually relies on his offensive game, and I love that about him. I think he's going to be able to close the distance in this fight pretty early, and probably take one or two rounds. But I do expect Stephen Thompson to, last through those couple of rounds, and then really start to pour it on as Woodley gasses. Brandon, you already mentioned the gassing. You both mentioned the gassing, and it's going to happen unless he lands that big punch, and I just don't see it happening. And then Thompson's just going to keep the distance in the third into the fourth, and I think in the fourth, Woodley's just going to be too tired and ultimately get TKO'd. So I actually have the same exact prediction Chris does with fourth round TKO by Thompson. But I think I'm actually going to limit my exposure to this fight to only GPPs, and I'm probably going to be 50-50 split on both of them just because of the first round KO upside for Woodley and its price. Its price is kind of ridiculous, as Brandon already touched on. So, these are two GPP plays for me, and I'm going to have heavy exposure to both of them.
Yeah, I feel like even in the worst championship situations, the champ should still be like, the worst you should ever have a championship fight is like -110 to -110. I don't know a situation where you should ever have the challenger be this big of a favorite against the title holder. I just find it to be it's stupid. I don't know.
Especially a title holder that just got a first round TKO over a guy who had defended his belt twice.
Yeah, that was a huge win. If you look at Stephen Thompson's wins, I think a lot of this is based off of his win over Rory McDonald. And like I talked about offline, Rory McDonald stifled Tyron Woodley for 3 rounds. He put his arms out. He had these lunging sort of hooks that kept him at distance, and he had this like methodical forward pace with his footwork. It was slow and sort of plodding, but it was deliberate enough to keep Woodley moving backwards and constantly questioning his own timing. If Stephen Thompson decides to employ that game plan, he will win this fight easily. The biggest stress for me on it, though, is has Woodley advanced enough in his training? Has he done enough to overcome those sorts of things? Fill those holes in his stand-up. Woodley's never really been a good striker off of his back foot. Like he's a forward moving fighter. And if Stephen Thompson takes the initiative and starts making him move backwards as opposed to like weathering the storm and then trying to gas him out the way Nate Marquardt did, I mean, sure he can win that way, but he's setting himself up for a potential loss as opposed to a sure thing win. I feel like even with the price tags, Stephen Thompson is the play. But Tyron Woodley, man, he's got that first round knockout potential. He could be in a lineup. In fact, I'll make that prediction. If Tyron Woodley gets a first round finish, he will be in the winning lineup at the end of the night. So in a card where you're probably going to burn a couple of bucks to make a couple of bucks, I don't have any shame in burning a buck on Tyron Woodley. All right. Next up, we've got Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. This is an interesting fight to me. It's two undefeated Polish girls. Joanna Jędrzejczyk is coming in at 9,300, and Kowalkiewicz is the cheapest fighter on the card at 6,900. Uh, if it was a main slate, I feel like there is a lot of value in Kowalkiewicz, especially since it's a 5 round fight, and I think she loses a decision unless what she actually mentioned on Embedded that she's suffering from jet lag and she only came into town on the 4th. So she's given herself 8 days to acclimate. But Joanna Jędrzejczyk moved her camp to Florida. She's actually training at American Top Team now, and I thought that was a huge move for her. I'm not a big fan of champs moving camp while they're champ. Usually if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. But she wanted to be more acclimated to America. She wants to be a star in America. And that to me sounds like the right mind frame for a champion who wants to be champion for a long time. Last week, we saw Tony Ferguson put up 129.5 points, winning a 5 round decision against Rafael dos Anjos. And I think Joanna Jędrzejczyk over 5 rounds in a decision win could beat that number. I think that she has like 140 point, 150 point upside, actually, which is unprecedented for DFS. Uh, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, even in a loss, she could take, she probably still actually make value at about 69 points. Uh, it just depends if she gets finished or not, if jet lag is an issue. Ridge, what's your take on these ladies?
Yeah, so Kowalkiewicz is actually one of my favorite value plays on this card. I think this is a pretty underrated fight. I think it's kind of flying under the radar just because of how dominant Joanna's been. But Kowalkiewicz has come in and she's pretty much stormed her way through her UFC opponents, and she's a legit fighter. And not only that, she's already seen Joanna before. Yeah, she got subbed in the second round. I understand, but neither one of these girls are the same fighters they used to be. And she knows what it's like to share an octagon or a ring, whatever, with Joanna. So it's not going to be like that intimidation factor that Ronda Rousey used to give to girls. This girl knows what to expect. She's been here for a few fights now. She's been in the ring with this girl, and she's a legit fighter. She has legit skills. She's really durable, and quite honestly, I think this is going to be a really, really tight fight for 2-3 rounds, maybe even. The question I do have is, does Kowalkiewicz really have the endurance to last much past the third round? We haven't really seen it, so there's no telling. And personally, with the volume that Joanna, the pace that Joanna tends to fight at, and Kowalkiewicz can fight at, I don't see her really lasting much past the third. So I do think that this is going to be a 4th round or 5th round TKO by Joanna, but I think the volume is going to be there for Kowalkiewicz to be a very, very solid. I wouldn't call it a pump play because of the volume she's going to throw. I would just call it a value play. I think she's going to be solid for cash games. If you really need room in your lineup, she is by far my favorite fighter that's in that lower tier of prices. So I have no problem throwing either one of these ladies in the cash. I wouldn't throw Kowalkiewicz into a GPP, but Joanna can be thrown anywhere. Like Brandon said, her points are going to be astronomical in this fight.
Chris, I know you didn't have a lot of research on this one due to time constraints. Is there anything you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, unfortunately, there were 3 fights that I was not able to research. I got stuck at work a lot longer than I expected today, and I thought I was going to be able to finalize my research. But luckily, it is only Wednesday, and we have till Saturday, so I can still do the rest of the research, and you guys can take care of our guests for those 3 fights. So I do apologize to everybody that that did happen to me. So.
Hey, no apologies needed. It's a lot of research. It's a lot of time spent. So if you miss one or two, it's not a problem. Nothing really I want to add to that. I'm just reinforce the fact that I'm pretty huge on Joanna. She really is. I mean, personality aside, she rubs people the wrong way. She's a complete fighter. She can go to the ground and sub people, but she doesn't need to because her stand up is. I would say she's probably the best female stand up fighter in mixed martial arts. Uh, Basically, she's the female equivalent of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. If you look at her credentials going all the way back to before MMA for she's a multiple time Muay Thai champion. Just really a class fighter in terms of skill. All right, moving down. We are out of the championship fights. Just a reminder, all 3 of those fights we just talked about are 5-round fights. And that means big business for DFS purposes. Anytime you get extra rounds, it's basically like going into overtime for NBA or anything else for that matter. Next up, Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero. The former champ Weidman is his first fight back since losing to Luke Rockhold for the title. He's 13-1. Yoel Romero is 11-1. He's his most recent win, I believe, was against Jacare Souza in what you could call a controversial fight. If you watch that fight, I feel like Yoel won it. He was a dominant first round, and even though he ended up doing what he always does, which is succumbing to a takedown late in the fight because he gasses, even though he's a Olympic world champion, was he got a silver medal or has he got a gold medal or does he have one of both? I can't remember, but
I know he's got a silver.
Yeah, I think he got a gold at the Worlds 2 years later. Yoel Romero.
Okay.
Yeah, he won an Olympic silver, but then he got a gold medal at the Worlds 2 years later out of Cuba. Uh, Everybody knows Weidman. He's the All American. It's literally his nickname. He's a grappling savant. He took on Andreas Galvao, who was like a 5th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu after only 1 year of training in jiu-jitsu, and he almost won. Like he got to the finals at the Abu Dhabi Submission Championships. So I mean, Chris Weidman's grappling credentials are off the charts. My problem with Chris Weidman's style is he's a bit flat-footed. His punches seem to come slow, but his timing is great. Like when it comes to a guy who is a slow fighter, no one actually times his punches better than Weidman. He fights at his own pace, and people succumb to his pace. He doesn't run out of gas. He always moves forward. He's got that Cain Velasquez mentality when it comes to fighting for the takedown. If he misses one, he's just going to come right back with another, and he's not going to get discouraged. Chris Weidman knows he can take Yoel Romero down, and he knows when he can take him down. It's just a matter of what can Chris Weidman gas the man out to get to that point. Because Yoel Romero has these little bursts of strikes, like akin to Sam Alvey, the way Sam Alvey will do nothing, and then out of nowhere, a big giant bomb lands. Yoel Romero does that, except he does it in like combinations. Alvey throws one big punch, but Romero will land like 3 or 4 incredible shots, including like spinning back fists, crazy timed uppercuts. And his ankle pick is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Ridge, I hope you'll touch on that. But Romero can just like in perfect stand-up posture, reach down and grab the man's foot and flip him on his ass. It's fantastic, actually. Uh, for DFS purposes, though, I gotta love Weidman in this one. His price tag is 8,500, which I feel is a little high. Yoel Romero is actually coming in at 7,700, which gives him immense GPP value for me, just because Weidman was finished in his last fight. Yoel has the potential to do that. He can land a big strike on anyone. If you can land a big punch on Jacare and drop him, you can drop Chris Weidman. So I got GPP on Romero, but I think Weidman is a strong play everywhere else. Chris, what's your take on this fight?
Yeah, this is one of those where I don't know if I'd want to touch either one of these guys in cash. Just because when you have a fighter who is as dominant as Weidman was, then loses, making his next fight against a guy who's with the caliber of Yoel Romero there, I don't know, I don't like it. I don't like it for cash. GPP, absolutely. For Romero, I think I like Romero a little bit more for GPP purposes because of the price. And but Weidman's got a 5-inch reach advantage. It's going to help him a little bit there. And But I don't know. I feel like Weidman, he's a little hittable. You know, he's not that he. I don't know. I hate using that word. Just I don't know. But he takes a punch. He can. You know, he's. I don't know. I hate using that word hittable for a guy like Weidman, but kind of sort of is, I guess. But I don't know. Like you touched though, Yoel Romero, real suspect in his cardio. So I don't know. Again, this is one of those I'm really struggling to come up with a winner who I like to win this fight. Might not touch either one of these guys in very many lineups because I don't. But again, it's that there's high upside in the finish for both of them. So I don't know. I'm glad I got a few extra days here to get more of a feel for this fight because there are a couple fights that I still want a little bit more. I don't know. I need to just kind of know how the fighters, you know, what's going on in their heads, or you know, something like that. That could be the X factor. You know, maybe something's happening. I don't know. I think this is a close fight, and I'd like to wait a little bit closer to Saturday before I do make a final decision. I'm not going to lie on that one.
Yeah, we might actually end up with Yoel Romero having weight issues. He has a little bit in the past come to the scale a little bit heavy. He's never officially weighed in overweight, but he's used his second attempt a few times. Weidman, I don't see any problems there. The man, he cut 24 pounds in 24 hours to fight Damian Maia on 2 weeks' notice. So, I mean, Weidman's a pro's pro. Ridge, what's your take on this fight?
Yeah, so maybe one of my favorite fights on the card just because they're two outstanding wrestlers. So it kind of falls right in my realm, which I love. But I don't see this being a wrestling match since I do think it's going to kind of cancel each other out. But, you know, Romero brings this size and speed combo that you really don't see very often. And he's not just doing it with strikes, you know, as you touched on with his ankle pick. The takedowns are just they're fast as shit. I mean, everything he throws is just explosive, which is why he's an Olympian. I mean, the athletic ability plus the technique that he has is really insane. But Weidman's wrestling is also really, really good, and he has fought other people that have this, you know, explosive power. So I do think that the wrestling kind of negates itself in this fight. You're going to see some takedowns here and there, and I think both of them are going to score at least one. But it's going to come down to who has the better striking. And personally, I think Weidman's striking is better. Yes, it's slower, but it's more accurate. He can go. I think he has a better gas tank personally. Yoel's going to gas. It's going to happen. You know, you have to feed all those muscles that he has. Mm-hmm. And I think Weidman's going to end up winning this down the stretch pretty handily. So I'm going to have Weidman in my cash lineup. That's a freebie for you guys. He's going to be in my cash lineup. But I will definitely have at least one or two GPP shares of Romero just for his explosive nature and KO upside, because this is MMA and anyone can get touched, especially when you're fighting someone as dangerous as Romero. But yeah, that's where I stand. I think Weidman's a great play in cash and okay play in GPPs. He can always TKO him late when Romero gasses, but I think he's going to just beat him by a decision, and then it's going to come down to how much volume he lands for how high he's going to score. So yeah, I got Weidman as a good play anywhere, and Romero as strictly GPP.
Yeah, and I know I talk about the intangibles a lot, but this is one of those fights where at the end of the day, Chris Weidman has a better MMA fight IQ. Like his grappling credentials extend beyond wrestling, and I don't think Yoel Romero even has a white belt in jiu-jitsu. Whereas Weidman, if he gets top position, I think he's more dangerous than when Jacare got top position against Romero, because at that point, after all the hits Jacare had taken, he just sort of laid on top of him and held side control and fished for an arm triangle. It wasn't very impressive for a guy that on paper is better at grappling than Chris Weidman. But I think if you combine his college wrestling with his jiu-jitsu, Weidman is probably the best grappler at 185. Even though Romero is an Olympic medalist, he just doesn't use it the way he should. I mean, he's got a really strong double leg to go on top of that ankle pick I talked about, but he's so easily like his build, the way he's so top heavy. Once he starts to gas, actually his top heaviness makes him susceptible to the double leg takedown. And I think Weidman's double leg is up against the fence is probably the best in the division. Uh, would you echo those sentiments, Ridge, before we move on?
I'm good. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there.
Right on. Okay, I just having you validate my choice.
No, I'm good.
All right, next up, what should have been fight of the year, which was supposed to be Donald Cerrone versus Robbie Lawler, but like within 5 days or something of that fight being booked, I think it was the first fight actually booked for UFC 205. Lawler pulled out, and so we've got Donald Cerrone versus Kelvin Gastelum. Donald's coming in at 31-7, whereas Gastelum's coming in at 12-2. Cerrone's actually one of the biggest favorites on the card at 8,900. And even though it would seem like there's value in Gastelum at 7,300, he constantly misses weight. He constantly has cardio issues. You know, he's a heart fighter. He comes at you, you know, with everything he's got constantly. He's always moving. You know, he only lost a split decision to Woodley in a fight. I thought Kelvin Gastelum won, but because he missed weight by so much, I think that the judges were a little biased in that fight. Uh, I was a fan of Gastelum. I always will be a fan of Gastelum. I love the way he fights and his style, but Donald Cerrone not having to cut any weight virtually to fight this fight. I mean, I think he cuts like 11 pounds maybe, but he used to cut that 11 pounds plus another 15 to get down to lightweight. So, I mean, Donald Cerrone's coming in fat and happy, and he's done nothing but excel since he's been at 170. I mean, he's finishing guys that have never been finished. He's winning fights against guys like Rick Story that he should have lost. You know, Donald Cerrone is a legit 170 fighter. I can't think of a better guy who has moved up in weight and excelled the way Donald Cerrone is. I love this fight in a million ways for Cerrone. I think he gets to the soft spot on the gut on Gastelum. I was actually talking about this with a friend of mine. I wish that Donald Cerrone had studied that Joe Rogan spinning back kick to the stomach, because that would be his key to victory in this fight. He's got some really good, attacks to the body as it is, but that sort of a kick, the Wonder Boy esque spinning back kick, would be the nail in the coffin for Cerrone. And maybe he's using it as a secret weapon, but that's how I want to call this fight. I see Cerrone winning this fight either by finish in the second round or dominant decision. I really can't. I think Kelvin Gastelum might actually be one of the only guys that I completely fade on this card. Like, he's fadeable for me, considering how many options we have. Ridge, what's your take on this fight, and do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I love this fight. And at first, when I first saw it, for some reason I was like, oh, Gastelum's going to be a really good value on this card. And then I started being like, Ryan, it's really dumb. You know, the way Cerrone's fighting right now, Gastelum just doesn't match up well in this fight. Yeah, he's always going to come out. He's a hard guy. You know, he's a gamer. But he's short. He doesn't have reach, and Cerrone uses his reach as good as anyone. Gastelum, you know, he can take you down and grind you out. Well, guess what? Cerrone is really, really good off his back. Also, he has some of the best takedown defense in the division. He had some of the best takedown defense at 155. It just kind of depends on what he's thinking. Does he want to go to his back, or does he want to keep it on his feet? And he kind of does whatever he really pleases, because he's comfortable anywhere. If you go back and you look at Gastelum versus Neil Magny, I think that this is going to be kind of similar, except Cerrone is much better than Magny at keeping the distance and striking. So as bad as Magny beat up Gastelum for the first 2 rounds of that fight, it's going to be even worse with Cerrone. He's just going to be able to keep him away, land his kicks and his punches whenever he wants, and he's going to touch him up bad. I think this is going to be a pretty ugly fight. I have Cerrone winning pretty big. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to knock him out, because Gastelum is a really tough dude, but he's definitely going to easily win a decision if he doesn't get the stoppage.
All right, Chris, what's your take on Cerrone versus Gastelum?
Got a laugh here. A lot of the stuff you guys have said, I really kind of already had my notes here. So
I'm really only gonna mention one kind of thing here. Is the thing about Kevin Gastelum is can be a little bit tentative at times, and that is literally the key factor that I look at. Everything that you guys talked about, and then I add this one thing is that he is kind of tentative. He doesn't. There's just those little split moments. He just I don't know. I don't know what happens to him, and he hasn't. Nobody's really he's been really taking advantage of with that. With the way Donald Cerrone is fighting, how aggressive he is, he just looks unstoppable at this weight class right now, welterweight. And I don't know. I mean, I hate getting such a big head on this fight because we've all been disappointed in these fights before. We've seen the Kevin Gastelum win, and all three of us just jaw dropped like, what the heck just happened here? But I don't think that happens in this fight. I really think Donald Cerrone wins this probably. I want to say I'm not going to say first round, even though my gut says first round. I'm going to go at least second round just to try to be safe a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this is over fairly quick. I don't know. Like you said, Cerrone isn't cutting weight like he has, like he used to. He's just natural for him. Everything is natural right now. It's just this. When you say that, it just feels right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just feels right. This just feels right. And yeah, I love Donald Cerrone in this fight. This is kind of his price, unfortunately, is where it should be. It sucks that we'd have to work him in, but if you want a cash lineup, I think Donald Cerrone has to be in because he's about the safest fighter on the card. One of the safest fighters on the card, I should say.
Yeah, and an interesting note, actually, this is sort of a money fight for Donald Cerrone. It is on the biggest pay-per-view of the year. He is on the main card, so there's a good chance that Donald Cerrone is setting himself up for pay-per-view points. He's actually getting ready to spearhead the MMA Fighters Union. He went on record, if you listen to the BMF Ranch podcast that he does, he actually had a big, huge explosion that he went off about the UFC. I think Tim Kennedy was in on that podcast and a couple other guys. But basically, they got together and said, yeah, it's about time. And Donald Cerrone said, I'll be the guy. I'll be the guy that stands up for all of us. And it's about time we had a guy like him do that because these guys need to get paid. Donald Cerrone is making chump change compared to the rest of the guys that are above him on this card. And he fights more than any other fighter in the UFC. You can look at the record, man. This guy has had, 20 something, 24, 27 fights in the UFC since he came in from the WEC merger. And that's more than anybody. It's even more than the people who are on the current roster who have survived that amount of time. Guys like Michael Bisping, Patrick Cotes, a lot of guys that find a way to stay in the UFC and linger around for a while. He fights more than all of them combined. Huge on Donald Cerrone in this fight, and I love Kelvin Gastelum. He's a fighter I like to watch, but I just think it's a really poor matchup. He constantly struggles to make 170. He's been forced to move up to 185 in the past, and he's short for both divisions. Not much I can really touch on that one other than it's not going to be hard to build a lineup around Donald Cerrone. I think if you want to pay for the 8,900 price tag, you can still squeeze in a couple players that are in that 9,000 plus range as long as you stick with the value plays. I think he's good for cash and for GPP. I love Donald Cerrone here. All right, next up on the card, we've got Mma Tate versus Raquel Pennington. Mma Tate's coming in 18-6. This is her first fight back since she lost the title to Amanda Nunes. Raquel Pennington is 8-5, and don't let her record discourage you. She's quite the gamer, actually. She rises to the occasion of her opponents, which we've talked about in previous podcasts, and actually had it come through. In a fight like this, even if she loses, I actually think there's pretty decent value on her. Mma Tate has a price tag of 9,100, and I think on a card like this, with the amount of finishers that are on this card, I think Mma Tate is way overpriced. Are we singing a song? All right. Our first on-air song. So Mma Tate, like I said, hello. Hey, Chris, get your doorbell.
I'm not hearing anything from you guys right now.
Oh, I'm getting who's got a bird whistling?
Oh, that's me. That's my bird. Sorry, I'm trying to. Yeah, that thing will not shut up.
It's all good. That I was just pointing out he was singing us a song. It was kind of nice.
Yeah, he's probably not happy. I'm avoiding him right now. So.
Oh, okay. Well, tell him you're talking about Rocky Pennington at 7,100. maybe he'll.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love Rocky. I'm having her in probably every lineup. I love this woman. Love her. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just saying.
I mean, she's like Max Scherzer, when
Go for
Max Scherzer is facing, the Atlanta Braves or, some putsy, offensive team that, doesn't, everybody thinks that he's 80% owned. He sucks. But then he has those couple bad games, and now he's facing the Cubs in Chicago, and he'll go 8 innings, 10 strikeouts, and dominate and get the win.
Yeah, I mean,
this is what Rocky does. She'll have that matchup against. Whatever.
She had that. Well, no, she had that split decision with Holly Holm, and it was that was one of those times where she rose to the occasion. But then she goes out and has like a piss poor sort of decision win against somebody like Jessamine Duke. Really sorry fight. Like shouldn't even be in the UFC. But I think that the problem with Misha on this card is her price. If we could get Misha Tate at like 8,300, 8,500, somewhere in there, I'd be like all about her in cash games. But I think her price is a little shaky. What's your rest of the take on this?
Yeah, 9,100 is. Misha Tate is not a finisher. Neither of these are finishers. I mean, what do they have? I don't even know. It's not a lot. Neither of these fighters have a lot of finishes. This is not. This is going the distance. I mean, if you were betting in Vegas on how long this fight goes, this goes the distance. I would bet my house. I'd bet everything that this goes the distance. I mean, no way this fight finishes. So that takes all value away from Misha Tate unless, well, I don't know. I mean, it's only three rounder, and you got 3 5-round fights. I just don't like Misha Tate. I just cannot. I can't see myself putting her in even one lineup. I honestly think she's 100% fade. Even if she wins, doesn't matter. She's 100% fade in DFS purposes for me at that price.
Yeah, I think just because of this card specifically and the other fighters that are on this card, I would agree with that statement. But Ridge, I think you might have an alternate actual opinion on this. What's your take on this fight?
No, I kind of don't.
Oh.
They're pretty similar fighters. I mean, I think Misha Tate's a little better everywhere, but they're both just grinders that kind of stick around for a whole fight and wear you down, and then win when they need to win. And I just think Tate's a little better at it. So I'm kind of interested to see how this fight plays out, since they both do kind of like taking a little bit of a beating early. But I don't know if it's necessarily completely fair to say Tate's not a finisher. Yeah, she has a lot of decisions, but her jiu-jitsu game is fairly decent, and her wrestling game is, in my opinion, much better than Pennington. Striking, I think they're much closer to equal in that department. But I do feel that Tate wins the decision with maybe the possibility of a submission late, but I don't see that happening. I'm not taking flyers on it or anything like that. Like you guys said, I don't see how she meets value. It's just 9,100 for Misha Tate is kind of crazy. Pennington, I'm not necessarily all over her, just because her output is never really that high, and I don't see her winning this fight. But can she get you 35, 40, maybe 45 points? Yeah, no problem. But for that price range, if I'm only putting in one of those lower flyers, it's going to be Kovalkiewicz. But yeah, I pretty much feel like you guys do as far as Tate's priced out. She's priced out pretty much. So I'm not really going to have a lot of exposure to this fight in general. And if I play Pennington, it's going to be in a cash lineup just for salary relief.
All right, so moving on to the next fight, and the reason why I want to move on to it so fast is because of the price tags, actually. Frankie Edgar versus Jeremy Stephens. Frankie Edgar's coming in at 9,200, And Jeremy Stevens is way down at the bottom. He's rocking the $7,000 price tag. If I'm going to spend 9,100 on Mma Cheatsheet, then I probably got an extra $100 floating around to plug in Frankie Edgar, who over the course of the same 5 rounds is not only going to get a win, but he's gonna put up so much volume that it's gonna be well overpriced what Mma Cheatsheet is offering. I like Frankie Edgar in this fight in a million ways. Jeremy Stevens is one of the few guys that I'm fading. Now he does have one punch knockout power, and he does have the potential to rock Edgar in the first round and put him on Queer Street. But I don't think that it's going to end up being anything more than like the Gray Maynard rematch. Frankie's going to have enough time to recover if he does get rocked. He's going to have plenty of time to work. He's gonna just eat up the clock with strikes. It's what Frankie Edgar does. I mean, in DFS, they have this really weird way of telling you how much they average, but Frankie Edgar is averaging 86 fantasy points a fight. And that's only because of a couple of his losses where he didn't get the win bonus. He still put up enough volume to where if they actually gave him the win on some of these split decisions, he'd be averaging over 100 DFS points a fight. I love Frankie Edgar in this fight in a million ways. Uh, Jeremy Stevens, like I said, I'm fading him completely. It's just a bad matchup for him. There's not a whole lot of ways he can win unless he just lands the perfect punch. Ridge, let's start with you. What's your take on Edgar versus Stevens to start off the prelims?
Yep, I also love Edgar quite a bit, and I completely agree. If I'm spending 91 or 9,200, it's on Edgar. He should dominate this fight. Just yeah, Stevens is a gamer. He hangs around. He has a shitload of parts. He has plenty of power, but his skills just aren't at the same level. I think he's won 2 of his last 5 fights. I'm not sure how he's getting this high profile of a fight right now. Quite honestly, any fight with Frankie Edgar is a high profile fight, and I'm not quite sure how he got it. Do I see a path to victory for Stevens? Yeah, with the power he possesses, sure, he can knock it. He can easily knock Edgar out. But yeah, I don't see it happening. I think Edgar wins this fight pretty easily. I don't think he's going to knock him out. I think it's going to be a decision just because of how durable Stevens is. But like you said already, Brandon, the volume's going to be there. The guy just, when he throws combos, he's throwing 5-6 punches every time. And he's throwing a combo like every 10 seconds pretty much. So even in a decision victory, Frankie Edgar can easily get you 100 points in a 3-round fight.
All right, Chris, Edgar Stevens, you got anything to add?
This is definitely a clean sweep. Frankie Edgar. He hasn't been on his back since 2012.
That's a pretty good stat.
Okay, let me repeat that. He has not been on his back since 2012. Jeremy Stevens has been taken down in each of the last 4 fights. Frankie Edgar is just more active in everything. Striking, takedowns, just everything you want in DFS, especially with the upgraded points and the takedowns and all that stuff. Frankie Edgar is just he scores points for you in DFS. He is every bit that $9,100 price tag. He's worth every bit of it. He is again that other. Frankie Edgar and Donald Cerrone, I think, are probably two of the best chances for a win here tonight or on Saturday night. We'll get more into it, later on, but I feel very comfortable putting those 2 in so far. Yeah, and you can even break down just significant strike per minute and takedowns and all that stuff. We're not going to because we've been in this podcast for an hour now. We've still got quite a few fights left, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's definitely a fight where Edgar has more ways to win. Actually, you talked about why this fight happened, Ridge. It reminds me of when Uriah Faber lost his title shot against Barao, and then they gave him like Francisco Rivera next. Edgar's kind of that sort of fighter who's not afraid to start at the bottom all over again and work his way up. Especially since the clusterfuck that's going on at featherweight, with Conor not fighting and Jose Aldo refusing to fight anyone but Conor, and he's got the interim belt, and then not to mention his last fight he beat Frankie, which was a big letdown. If Frankie would have won that fight, it would have put the division on a different course, but since it didn't, Frankie is willing to accept that and fight at the bottom and work his way up. Now, he is lobbying for a title shot at 135 finally, but he wants it immediately. He doesn't want to have to wait. And Dominic Cruz is already booked against Cody Garbrandt on the New Year's Eve card, so Frankie's looking at waiting in 2 divisions once again. So that's kind of why he's at where he's at. All right, moving on quickly. We've got Khabib Nurmagomedov finally returning after years and years of only fighting once, basically, against Michael Johnson, who's fresh off a knockout win against Dustin Poirier and a headliner. That's how stacked this card is. Guys that headline the FS1 cards are actually deep on the prelims. It's that good of a pay-per-view. Khabib Nurmagomedov is a Sambo world champion. I believe he's an Abu Dhabi champion. I could be wrong there, but his grappling credentials are ridiculous. He's probably the best Sambo guy to come over from the Dagestani pool and dominate in the UFC. He's 23-0, and he's still a young guy too. He's only like 26, 27 years old. So he's got a lot of career left despite a lot of injuries that have kept him out of title contention, even though he's got the number one contender plopped next to his name by UFC rankings. Michael Johnson is a pretty decent stand-up fighter with he's got really good hooks. He knows how to throw uppercuts and weird looping punches in a way that allows him to win. But in this fight, I just see Khabib getting a hold of him and smothering him and suplex. I'm going to make a prediction. I'll put the over/under at 3.5 suplexes, and I would take either side. I think he gets about 3, maybe 4 suplexes, and it's going to be fantastic to watch. To be honest, this is going to be one-sided beatdown, in my opinion. I don't think there's a single way Michael Johnson can beat Khabib Nurmagomedov other than catching him while they're early in the fight with a big shot that puts him wobbly. And we've never seen Khabib wobbly, and he's eaten a lot of shots in his career. Khabib takes a punch to get a takedown as opposed to take a punch to give a punch. He's not afraid to eat shots to get what he wants, which is put you on your back and beat you down. And he'll do that over and over again. I mean, I haven't seen a fighter who can demoralize his opponent with his grappling since Chael Sonnen was in his prime. I mean, it's just what Khabib does. It's fantastic to watch. And if you're somebody who appreciates that style like I am, then this is definitely a fight you don't want to miss. Ridge, what's your take on Nurmagomedov versus Johnson?
Yep, so I'm probably not going to go into the long spiels I've been going into. We slept on Michael Johnson against Poirier, and I completely plan on sleeping on him again here. Nurmagomedov is a monster. He's coming in very, very motivated, and I think he's just going to destroy Johnson. He's a great play in all formats, and I will be completely fading Johnson. I see no reason to have even a flyer on him unless you're really just looking for that guy that's going to be very, very low owned and maybe get a lucky knockout. I see no other reason to roster him because I just can't see it happening. I think Khabib is just going to come in and just dismantle him for the whole fight. So, yeah, Nurmagomedov is a great play in all formats. I'm going to have high exposure to him.
Yeah. Hey, everybody listening, watch Khabib Nurmagomedov on YouTube. Google it. 6-year-old boy wrestles bear. The 6-year-old boy wrestling the bear is Khabib Nurmagomedov. His dad used to make him wrestle bears to train for Sambo. What kind of sick shit is that? Chris, what's your take on this fight?
I got to disagree with Rich a tiny bit because I'm never sleeping on Michael Johnson again. I literally almost quit DFS last time he fought. Not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. I almost quit DFS for my entire life after that fight. I was so pissed. But Michael Johnson, I mean, this guy he gets himself motivated like nobody. I mean, but these are two very motivated fighters. Very, very, very motivated fighters. Whether Michael Johnson can develop enough skill during the last fight to now I don't know. That's a tough one because it is going to take another lucky punch like he hit Poirier with. He's going to have to hit
Nurmagomedov.
I always butcher his name. I'll just go with Khabib. It's going to take another lucky shot against Khabib there to win this fight. You know, Michael Johnson throws a lot of wasted punches. He doesn't have the greatest cardio. You know, he's had some. I don't know. He's had close fights where he's bought. You know, I mean, he bought Nate Diaz really tough and lost a very close fight to that. You know, to him, he's a tough guy. So, but the guy. I mean, you're right. Khabib just he wrestles bears for crying out loud. I mean, the guy is an actual beast. I mean, I don't know if he's like I don't know if they make mutants over there, like in X-Men or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, the guy probably could have played, you know, some type of superhero or something like that. You know, I mean, the guy just looks like an absolute beast. It'd be really hard to take a. But again, I wouldn't. I got to take a couple flyers on Michael Johnson. I have to. I can never sleep on him again. After watching him hit Poirier like he did, I mean, he hit him hard, and he had just this fire inside of him, and he still has that fire because nobody believes he can do it again. And boy, does he like to be the underdog, and boy, does he like to, you know, show the world what he can do against the fighter he is not supposed to win against. So for that reason, I have to have a couple flyers on Michael Johnson. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I really don't have a problem with that, to be honest. Like, I could see the logic behind it. Michael Johnson has made me burn quite a few lineups, tear up a bunch of paper, and put my head in my ass. But, you know, the thing about the Poirier fight is we were sort of nervous about it, knowing that Poirier had been knocked out in the past. I mean, the guy got flatlined by Conor McGregor, and you know, he lost. He got Darce choked by Chan Sung Jung. He lost to Cub Swanson. You know, Poirier. The writing was on the wall that he could be defeated. And Khabib Nurmagomedov is 23-0. He's never once even feigned in a round. I can't think of even a round where he decided to take it off. I mean, the man just goes constant. He trains out of AKA, you know, with Daniel Cormier and Luke Rockhold and Cain Velasquez, and he holds his own against those guys. Like, they'll grapple him, and as a 155er, like, he's taken down Daniel Cormier. Like, that's insane. Daniel Cormier is an Olympic level wrestler. That's just insane. So I'm all over Khabib, but you know, Johnson does create his own hype, and he believes his own hype. And the only person that does it better than Michael Johnson is Conor McGregor. He's the only other person that makes his own hype and believes it that as well as he does. It's insane. So I mean, Michael Johnson, you know, just on that is worthy of a couple of flyers if you've got the money. But if you're trying to be disciplined, I would fade Michael Johnson personally. Moving on. That's not saying, Chris, that you're not being disciplined. I totally see the logic. Next up, we're almost done with this card. We got 4 fights left. Rafa Natal versus Tim Boesch. All right, this is the 8100 matchup. I don't know why they picked this as the 8100 matchup. I thought you would lean a little bit more towards Natal. Vegas is leaning a little bit towards Natal, so I guess if they were going to throw us a bone, this would be the one. I like Natal and Cash as long as Boesch doesn't catch him with one of his big giant barbarian thunder punches. You know, I see Natal being this, even though he's a bit of a sort of duck-footed, floppy sort of fighter who throws weird, like what's the word I'm looking for? He's loppy. I mean, Rafa Natal is a loppy dude. Like but with that said, the only person in the UFC he hasn't been able to take down is Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker beat him pretty handily in the last fight, just off of speed and technique. And Tim Boesch doesn't have a lot of speed or a lot of technique, so I think that this is a Rafa Natal's fight to lose. I think the loser of this fight gets cut, and Tim Boesch knows what it feels like to get cut. So with that said, he's free rolling here. I think that considering they let him have another fight after losing 3 in a row, especially that knockout loss to Dan Henderson, Tim Boesch is on a complete free roll. So Tim Boesch for GPPs, I will definitely have some shares of, but I think Natal is a pretty decent cash play overall. If he gets a decision win, like I think, he should end up scoring like 80 points, 79 to 88 points, somewhere in there. Chris, do you have any take on this fight at all?
You know, unfortunately, this one and the other ladies. Unfortunately, I did not get to this fight, so
not a problem.
I do apologize that I do have to skip this one. Pass on to Ryan.
All right, Ryan, what you got?
Yeah, the only thing that I disagree with is just Natal being a cash play. Just for me personally, I'm not going to go against that barbarian punch. They're both firmly in GPP land. for sure. I do think Natal should win this fight. He's the better overall fighter everywhere. But it doesn't matter how bad you're beating up, Coach. He can always knock you out, and he's done it quite a few times. So I'm just not going to go against that in my cash lineup. As I think most people that have listened to this podcast know, or have talked to me in the gut lines or the prime room, I am more of a conservative cash player, and I do not like taking risks in my cash lines like this would be. Anyone going against Tim Boach, in my opinion, is a very risky situation, and I'm a risk-averse person, so I'm limiting them both to GPP.
Yeah, I got no problems with that, to be honest. I feel like Natal should win the fight, and if he does win the fight by decision, I think that there is enough value there at 8,100 to justify a cash play. I know I get the risk reward to it, but it's basically price versus scoring for me. I think Hoffental would be. I think the only time he's actually been like completely flatline knocked out was against Tim Kennedy. Like Tim Kennedy fought like a pretty good 3-round fight with him. Actually, it was a 5-round fight, and then I think he knocked him out in the third because it was the one time Hoffental had a headlining fight. He took it on short notice because Tim Kennedy's original opponent dropped out. It was quite a few years ago. I'm just going offhand because my resource device decided to die on me, so a little bit of spitballing, but I do recall that fight specifically. All right, moving on next, we've got Bilal Muhammad versus Vicente Luque. And if you're like me, you don't like Luque. He just constantly seems to ruin lineups the same way Michael Johnson does. Who knows? Maybe at a certain point in their career, even though I believe they're out of the same camp, maybe Luque and Johnson will fight each other. But in this fight, Bilal Muhammad's coming off a win against Augusto Montano, and so what? That's what I say about that. So what? Who cares? You beat one of the Montano brothers. That doesn't mean shit to me. That just means you beat the worst guy in your division. And he didn't even do it impressively. Like, it took him 3 rounds to finally get the TKO. It was a pretty sweet TKO when he finally got it. But Bilal Muhammad is flat-footed. He's got decent structure in his stand-up, but he just doesn't throw enough volume. And that was pretty disappointing for me. When Bilal came into the UFC, I thought that he was going to be a world beater, a really good future prospect. But really, he's just sort of like hung around. He's 1-1. It wasn't impressive neither, like I said. Luque, to me, though, he's really shown that he's got a lot of grit. He goes out there and he's not afraid to lose to win. And I can appreciate that for a GPP play. Vicente Luque's price tag to me is a little surprising. I think he's around 83, 8,400. Like I said, my device decided to die on me. But Muhammad as an underdog pick, I don't have a problem with it. Sherdog has him with a second round TKO win in a sloppy back and forth fight. And I do agree with the sloppy back and forthness of this fight, but I just don't see how Bilal can get a TKO by the second round. I think if he does, it'll be in the third, and that's only because Luque decided he's finally going to give up. Really, Luque only loses if somebody gets a dominant grappling position on him and can either wear him down or submit him. I like Luque just on his volume. Ridge, what's your take on this fight?
Yeah, I think I'm slightly opposite on this fight. I've kind of flip-flopped back and forth on this fight since I've seen it, since I saw it announced. Both of these guys they're both pretty well-rounded fighters. They're both young. And yeah, Luque is on a three-fight win streak. Muhammad only beat Augusto Montano. I get it. But Muhammad was pretty impressive outside of the UFC. Now he's 2 fights in. He's getting more experience inside the octagon. Luque has struggled, like his fight with Michael Graves. He's struggled with guys who can grapple him. I think it depends on what Muhammad does here. Is Muhammad going to stand up and try to box with him? If he does that, then it's a lot more dangerous of a fight, and I think he loses a stand-up fight. But if Muhammad gets to his wrestling game, which is actually kind of decent, he just doesn't use it very often, then I think he can. I think he can win that fight. Personally, I'm taking Muhammad by a decision and a very, very, very close decision, probably a split. But I don't love it at all. I'm not going to have a lot of either one of these guys. If I do, it will be in some GPP flyer. I'm too undecided on this fight. I think it's too close of a fight to call for me to really be putting my eggs into either one of the baskets.
All right, Chris, what you got?
Yeah, I'd probably avoid this one too. I mean, I know both fighters pretty well. I mean, Muhammad is well-rounded, got good, crisp, clean punches. Just a little untested, though. You know, like Rich said, you know, I mean, he's only got a couple fights in the UFC, and his last fight against Montano. I mean, geez, let's just not get into Montano again. We already, I don't want to say trashed him last time, but I don't know. We could have been a little nicer.
He's on the MMA Cheat Sheet Live shit list. Let's put it that way.
Anyway, Muhammad's got a great heart. You know, when he has been tested, he's taking a lot of shots. You know, and he's got a good chin. You know, got a good stamina, and you know, he's able to find his range, and he is able to. You know, he throws a lot of volume too. What is it, 5 something significant strikes, you know, per minute or whatever. You know, so he's busy. He's a busy fighter. Luque, not quite as busy, but he is, again, he's technically, you know, but he's just, I don't see a lot of head movement out of him. Not as much as I'd like to see. Maybe, hopefully he's improved on that. But I'm probably leaning Belal Muhammad, probably. But again, it's just, I don't know. I think there's enough fights on this card where I feel safer. And, you know, I don't necessarily I want to take down a GPP, of course, but that's not my goal. My goal is to just profit each weekend. And if you want to make a profit, you need to stick with safer fighters. And I think this is a fight that you can pretty much fade if you're looking to be safe. So, however, I just said that I would take Michael Johnson in a couple flyers. So don't listen to me.
No, I think that's a fair evaluation. I do think that there's value in Belal Muhammad just based off of everything we just said because he is the underdog. Anytime you can get a guy like that in the 7,000s, I think it's worth maybe 20% flyers. Like if you're doing 10 lines, you could have him in 1 or 2. I wouldn't be offended by that. Just to move things along, I guess we'll leave that at that. Not a lot I want to dive in with those guys. Next up, we've got Jim Miller, the old man himself. He's actually a year younger than me, so I don't know why I say that, but he's going up against Thiago Alves. Thiago Alves is finally dropping down to 155. He got sick of being the smallest guy at 170, which is strange because the man had a serious problem making weight at 170. So I guess all the time off he's taken between his last fight and this one, he's managed to drop muscle mass, drop fat. He's cleaned up his diet. He got himself a nutritionist, and now he's trying to reinvent himself at 155. I think Jim Miller is a pretty good first test for doing that. He's not afraid to fight anybody. Hence taking a fight like this. Thiago Alves is a decent name. He had a couple of really fun fights with John Fitch back in like 2008 and 2010. I think the rematch was really fun stuff from Thiago Alves typically, and really fun stuff from Jim Miller typically. I think this is going to be a fun, exciting fight. And if you don't have Fight Pass, this would be the kind of fight to get you on there. At least try the 7-day free trial just to see this fight. For DFS purposes, Thiago Alves is the favorite. Jim Miller is quite the underdog. I like Jim Miller's value, but it just kind of depends on what sort of Thiago Alves shows up. If Thiago Alves gasses like he actually used to do at 170, then I think Jim Miller has a really strong chance to win a decision here or even possibly get a late submission. But Thiago Alves has first round upside written all over him. The older Jim Miller gets, despite the fact that he's sort of had a couple of wins under his belt recently this year, they weren't exactly quality big name wins. He beat down Takanori Gomi, and he just got a big win. Who was the other big win just up against recently? I can't remember. Thank you guys. Yes, that was a pretty fun fight. For me personally, I got to go with Alves and the GPPs, but I don't have a problem with Miller and Cash. We'll start with Chris on this one. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, this will be interesting because, like you said, Alves actually lost 10 pounds of muscle. He cut off 10 pounds of muscle. Switch nutritionist. I mean, he's trying to lose a lot of weight for this fight, and he hasn't fought in 17 months, and he's had a lot of injuries, something I can relate to. Jim Miller, he's getting close to his last fight. He knows it. He's talking about it. He's almost retired a couple times, and then just keeps getting better and just keeps, his last couple fights, he's starting to show his improvement. He's been responding to camps very well, and they're going well. This one is going well again. I like Jim Miller. I like the fact that he's just, he's got good momentum going right now, and I don't know. I don't like a guy coming off of such a long layoff. It's a year and a half. I mean, that's a long time. You're nursing injuries. You're cutting 10 pounds. You're switching nutritionists. Maybe it's a good switch. I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about good nutritionists out there. I know his old one was Mike Dolce or whatever. I don't know who he's going with now. But, I don't know. I think I would favor Jim Miller a little bit personally, just because of all those little factors that I'm talking about there.
All right, Chris, what you got? I'm sorry, Ridge. Sorry.
All good. From a fan perspective, I love this fight. I'm really excited to see what Alverez is going to do at the lighter weight class. We haven't seen him in a while, and he took all that time to, like Chris said, cut off all that muscle, and it's going to be really interesting to see what he looks like, what his style looks like. He's a phenomenal Muay Thai fighter, and his leg kicks are some of the best that the MMA world has ever seen. They're not quite on the Jose Aldo level, but they're pretty nasty. If he can come out and establish those leg kicks and really get it to where Miller has no way of getting this fight to the ground, then I think Alverez wins this fight. Maybe not easily, but he'll take a decision. But Miller has looked good. Miller always looks good, except for the one fight against Nate Diaz when I feel like he didn't even fight at all. It almost looked like he just kind of gave up before he walked in the octagon. But Miller's looked good recently, and as far as DFS purposes go, I'm just going to sit back and watch this one as a fan. I'm going to take a GPP flyer, at least one, if not two or three, on Alverez. And much outside of that, I'm really not going to touch this fight just because of how many other fighters I love on this card. And I'm gonna sit back and not stress about this one. I'm just gonna watch it and see what Alverez looks like, in his new body. I'm really excited to see that. But if I'm predicting anything, I think Alverez takes down that lead leg with some nasty leg kicks and works his way to a decision. If I'm gonna predict anything on the fight.
I wonder what the Vegas odds are on Alverez even making weight. I mean, he's been talking the talk so much that it actually worries me. It's like when a guy walks on my car lot and the first thing he says to me is, "Oh, I've got $10,000 in my pocket." And I look at his pockets and it's pretty clear that there's no fucking cash in your pocket, especially that much money. That's kind of my fear with Thiago Alves here. Like, he's saying all the right things, which tells me he's probably going to show up on the scale at like 159. If that's the case, I really favor Jim Miller, especially since his price tag is in the 7,000s. I really think that that's a pretty decent play. For some lineups, it just sort of depends on where you want your value to be. Jim Miller, I think, even in a decision win, if it goes that way, I think it's similar to what Diego Sanchez did last week, where he put up 59 points. And for his price tag, it doesn't necessarily bother me. It's not value, but I don't know. I agree with the fade overall. And I think Thiago has the GPP play, but Jim Miller, man, I just love the guy. I can't help it. I got to find some way to justify playing him in at least one line. That's just how I am. All right. What's that?
I don't blame you on that. I'm a huge Jim Miller fan, too.
All right. Last fight of the night. And it's one we can make it quick. We got Liz Carmouche coming back after one of the longest layoffs I've ever seen. In fact, so long I don't even know. Chris, I'm sure you do. Versus Caitlin Chikugian. And Chikugian is sort of the new breed at 135. There's not a lot of new 135 women's fighters coming in. So when a girl like Caitlin Chikugian shows up and beats a woman like Lauren Murphy, that actually means something to me. I think that she's got some skills and she's still developing her skills in a way that should allow her to beat someone with as much rust as Liz Carmouche has. But Liz Carmouche is like an Army Ranger vet. I mean, she's constantly been active. She did some jiu-jitsu tournaments to prove that she's still active. I think she ended up winning, actually. She phoned Sean Shelby and was like, "What's the deal?" Because she asked for some time off after her last fight, and he ended up giving her like almost 2 years off. So she felt like it was a political move. She's been chomping at the bit to get back in the octagon. So Liz Carmouche's ether is pretty up there in terms of getting back in there and performing. But I think Caitlin Chookagian is the wrong sort of fight for her. I think they should have given her actually somebody like Lauren Murphy, somebody who's a little bit more of a vet. I think that would have been a better fight for her. I think Caitlin Chookagian's grappling is going to be the edge in this fight. Stand up wise, both these girls can score points, but overall, I think Chookagian gets a decision win here. Ridge, you got anything on this?
Yeah, yeah. This is another one. I think I'm actually on the other side of the fence slightly. Carmouche is not a fighter to really be slept on. Slept on. I'm sorry. She's a tough, grinded out kind of girl. And personally, I think this is a pretty good matchup for her to come back to, because the UFC is going to see her more as a stepping stone, and then you have Caitlin I don't even know whatever her name is.
Chookagian.
Yeah, I can't even pronounce it. Sorry, I'll just call her Caitlin. So yeah, her coming in, she's undefeated still. She's on the rise, and everyone is basically. I think the UFC is looking at Carmouche as a stepping stone, and I think that's the wrong move in this fight. I think Carmouche wins this by decision. I don't think it's going away or anything like that. I think it's going to be fairly close, but I do have Carmouche winning this fight by decision. I'm probably going to have her in my cash line. Not going to say that's a free pick or anything, but there's a strong chance that I'm going to have Carmouche in my cash line. So, but yeah, Caitlin is in play as well. So both these girls are in play, but I would keep that to cash. I don't see too much of a GPP upside for either one, because I strongly believe this is going to be a decision fight.
All right. Liz Carmouche is actually 8,000 and Chookagian's only 8,200. So either way with this pick, you're getting somewhere right around the median line. I don't have a problem with either side of it in terms of what you just said. Chris, you got anything you want to add to this fight?
I'm not really, because I only had like a couple of notes on these ladies. I forgot that I did start, and then I never finished because I started at I'm like, why am I starting at the prelims? Start at the main card and work your way down. I've actually had better success when I've done that. So I changed, and then when I'm going through my notes here, I had a couple things here. It's just that Carmouche she's got one of the best top positions when she gets into that dominant position. She just got a little bit limited in her stand up, and she's got, so, and I'm kind of curious as to, you were talking that she's been busy. She's been doing tournaments, jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah.
So that is something I want to, I want to look more into. This is another fight I want to look more into, because I want to know more what she's done in this last 18 months that she's been off. Because, if she's improved, just because she's been off for 18 months from fighting doesn't mean she's going to come in with rust necessarily. If she's been competitive and active, and in jiu-jitsu to me is active competition, and I'm going to look more into this fight, because we still got a few more days, so I want to look more into this fight here before I really give any type of definitive decision on here or whatever. So yeah, that's about it. I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, I think Liz actually performed in the Eddie Bravo Invitational. That was one of them. There was another tournament. I can't remember if it was Metamoris or one of those, but it was at that level. She did some no-gi grappling, and she fared well, actually. I can't remember if she specifically won one of them or if she just made the finals, but she performed well. She was pretty high. She had a pretty high excitement level coming into her UFC return, I guess you could say. She's really chomping at the bit for this fight, and that could spell bad news for Caitlin Chookagian. Now you got me stumbling over it, Ridge. But Overall, though, I like both ladies. Though with all the value on this card, it's really hard taking people around the median line because all the value is at the high end or at the low end. It's sort of a strangely priced card in that matter because DK didn't throw us any bones this week. Uh, with that said, guys, you got anything you want to add before we go off the air?
No, I think we've kept them long enough.
I do too. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, we've go to bed, everyone.
All right. I hope you guys had a lot of traffic on your drive, especially if you're listening to us on the car on the way home. Give a shout out to DFS Prime lineups, hanging out in the gut room at Gut Lines, at Ridgers10, at Blood Rain 39, at Brandon Arcade, at DFS Prime lineups, plus his other handle at Prime lineups PR, I think it is. Still haven't figured that one out. Got to figure that one out. But with that said, we'll send you guys off the air and have a wonderful, awesome time watching fights.